Hey everyone, welcome to the Horror Show. I'm Cecil Laird.
I'm Marcia Parker.
And we are here to do another Patreon-requested review.
Yep.
This one was requested by Mikey Mnemonic, old-time friend of the channel,
Yep.
a.k.a. Mikey Trauma Trash, but he has, he's been a longtime supporter of the channel. He also does a podcast of his own, if I'm not mistaken, so I wish Fuego was here because he knows the deets on that, nonetheless. This review is for a movie called My Bloody Valentine, the original 1981 version. Now, we had previously seen the My Bloody Valentine 3D 2009, I believe, remake.
Yeah.
We both loved it. Loved it.
it.
And did you
Love
see it
it
in the theater too? Did we see it in
did.
3D together, maybe?
I don't know if we saw it together. I saw it. I think it was my first. The movie Pete and I saw the first.
You're kidding me. It was your
Our
first
first
date?
date.
That's adorable.
Our first movie date.
I loved it. I thought it was one of the first really, really good implementations of 3D with horror.
Yep.
Especially the pickaxe popping the eye straight out of the audience through the head.
Yeah.
So good, so good. So this movie, believe it or not, I was worried. I wasn't worried per se. I just wasn't expecting much, right? Because the remake had set such a high bar, and I had never seen the original. But I'm going to tell you right now, guys. I mean, doing this review like we normally do, we do our overall thoughts, then the story, the acting, the effects, all that stuff in turn. Thank you. I knew I mispronounced a word in there. Take a half step to your left, by the way.
Sorry,
see all that
I'm
empty
just
space
like,
over
you
there?
harping at me. I don't know where to stand.
I know. Well, before there was another person here, so. So anyway, guys, I loved this movie. Honestly, if I don't know how I never saw it growing up. Being a guy that went to the video store, video update, specifically specifically in my 12, 13, 14 years, they would have Tuesday 3 for 99-cent Tuesdays, and so I would go to the horror shelf and just literally pick up 9 movies, and that's how I watched a lot of series. I think I might have just continually passed this one over because it wasn't a series. You know what I mean? I think there was a few horror movies that just didn't have the cover art that got my attention and didn't have multiple entries, so I was like, oh, it's not like a slasher movie.
Right.
This was indeed a slasher movie, and if I had watched it back then, I guarantee you it would have been one of my utter favorites throughout my life. I loved the 1981 My Bloody Valentine. I would need to rewatch the new one again and really do a comparison to see which I liked more, but this is definitely one of the best 1980s slasher movies, and it's from 81. Yeah. So I utterly loved this movie. Your thoughts?
I thought it was good. I mean, it was a true slasher and in all aspects.
And it was also a whodunit.
It was a whodunit, and I mean, and that's what I thought was great about the remake of My Bloody Valentine was because you're like,
the resolution of the remake was better than the resolution of this one.
Yeah, it was, but at the same time, like it was really interesting, and they did take it to a different place than, and the remake, and you actually, I feel like you got you did get a lot more killing zones. Yeah. In the 1981.
A lot more death.
Yeah, a lot more death. It's different areas. It's not just
not just in the mine.
It's not just in the mine, which is really nice. It was like the whole town is affected, and you really. I said infected.
In fact, I was like, it's not that kind of movie, but sure.
Affected. With what happened with the backstory and recent events, so I thought that was really cool. You really got that attitude from it. It is totally 80s. It is so 80s. I'm pretty sure this movie set the tone for the 80s.
I would not argue against you.
Yeah, and that's fine, and I don't have anything against that. I felt like it
Keep
took
in mind,
away
though,
from
81 though, some of the slashers were in the 70s. Obviously, Texas Chainsaw was in the 70s. Halloween was 78. So slashers had been around before this, but I thought this. I agree with you saying that
totally
it set the tone for the 80s.
This is totally
because
rad.
this was not even. Because those slashers in the 70s, Texas Chainsaw was a really grimy, raw, visceral slasher. Halloween, in retrospect, was a relatively slick slasher movie that was masterfully done. Yeah. This one was the precursor of the 80s Friday the 13th and the 80s Texas Chainsaws, where you know, it's a little bit dirtier. It's not as grimy and as grindhouse as the first Texas Chainsaw was. This was a little bit slicker than that, but it was, yeah, it definitely set the tone for the rest of the 80s.
Yeah, it took that whole young kids having the, you know, premature relations and party, murder. They really had that at a heightened aspect. But they did a good job. I think just like some of the dialogue and some of the acting did pull me out of
that. Some of that felt very dated.
Yeah, no, it pulled me out. But I do think it was successful in the kills and the storytelling. So I felt like this was a good experience, and I'm glad that I did go through it since I did love the remake so much. Not just because it's Jensen Ackles.
No, that's a big reason.
It's a big reason. But
appropriate.
But no, I thought it was really fun, and I'm really happy that I had the opportunity to visit it, because I don't think I would have gone back and rewatched it, to be honest.
I'm glad you did too. I'm glad it was you ultimately. I mean, it was supposed to be us and Fuego. Fuego got caught up with other stuff, so we got to watch it instead. But that's fine. I'm glad, because we both had that connection with the remake.
Yep.
Keep knocking over Pickle Rick.
Pickle Rick.
But yeah, the story is again, it's a bit of a whodunit. It's what I found interesting is that it's not something that's done anywhere else except for the My Bloody Valentine murders or My Bloody Valentine movies, and it's that it centers around minors and their families, you know, and kids and stuff like that at times, but the minors themselves. And so basically, and I'll let you pick up the ball after I drop it at one point here. But it starts off with the minors. There's a guy that comes back to the fold who's been away for a while. And some would think he's got an axe to grind based on what happened before, but we're not sure. And meanwhile, there is a murder spree starting in the mines. There is someone that is mine savvy that's down there killing people. And I did find it funny that no matter what movie series you are, no matter what setting you have, Piranha 2, I think, or either Piranha or Piranha 2 had a couple swimming down to a shipwreck in a scuba gear, disrobing in scuba gear, and like banging underwater before they get attacked by piranhas. This one has a couple that makes their way down into the mine shaft and start to get randy in the mine when the killer attacks.
Yeah.
It's so funny that so many of those 80s horror movies just had to start with a randy couple banging.
You got to. It's like in the bylaws.
Yeah, I think you're right. So anyway, the idea is, and part of the intelligence of setting up the film is that the killer is in a miner's gas mask, you know, because that's what they had down there, because they didn't know what gases they'd be releasing as they were mining and stuff like that. So we don't know the identity of the person, so that's where the whodunit comes in. Yep. We see people getting killed by a dude in a mask, and then we see, after those kills, the remainder people talking about, like, well, who could it be, and who was down there, and how did they get down there, and blah 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 blah. But yeah, it eventually gets to a point where the teenagers of the town decide that they want to have a party down in the mines, and that obviously ends up with a slash spree in the mine party. So, yeah. What did you think of the story, Marcia?
So,
I mean, that's the long and short of it, right?
That is the long and short of it. I think the biggest point to that we want to make sure people understand is that in the past there was a miner who had gotten left behind, and he had come back, and after going into an institution, came back and actually went on a killing spree because the other miners left him down there to get to the town Valentine's Day party, and that's when he kind of broke. And so anytime that the town would have a Valentine's Day party, people would start to get murdered.
So they actually eliminated Valentine's Day.
They limited Valentine's Day
in the town
and for decades. And then they decided, hey, let's try it. Let's try and see what happened. And then people started to get murdered, and they're like, okay, we're gonna have to cancel it. Dudes came back. Something's happening, and we can't have all these kids, get murdered. So the kids decided to have the party at the mines, but not in the mines.
Right.
They had it in like one of the rec room areas, and that actually opened it up to all these other different possibilities for the killer to kill. and then they ended up migrating down to the mines, and so then you started getting the mine kills.
Right.
So
it was creative.
It's very creative. I really dug it, and I thought it was a really fun way to do the who did it while doing the slasher, really gory kills, and and there was still a minor character development and side stories. You had to feed in there in order to understand the why and the motivation, but it worked out. I thought it was really cool. I love the history, and then the history coming back.
Yeah,
and I think that's what made it really.
It's
fun.
A well structured movie and a well written. That's the thing. It's one of the better written slashers, not dialogue wise, but structure wise.
Right. Yeah.
I think it's very well set up and very well executed, and the whodunit makes sense, right? Because they all think it's either the ghost of the guy that did it way back then, or it's the guy himself having returned, and no one really knows.
Or somebody's going
Or
crazy.
somebody new just mimicking him, and idolizing him. So it's great by that estimation. And then, let's talk briefly about the acting before we get into the effects, because, the acting is okay. The acting is very 80s.
Very 80s.
Very, very early 80s.
Very, very.
But not to its detriment. It's not like 80s in that they didn't know how to act. It's just they were acting very 80s.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was a lot of adults acting like teenage kids. How they portrayed
30-year-olds being teens,
trying to be teens during that era, and that's how it felt. And it's okay. It's okay. It did, like I said, it did pull me out of the movie a few times because I'm just like, okay, guys, seriously,
okay, guys.
Can we tone down? Just
bring it down, just a scotch.
But that's okay at the end because I wasn't watching it really for the acting. I think the story did make up for that part, and it also the kills made up for it as well. But it wasn't. You don't expect an Academy Award for this acting.
No, not at all.
No.
But let's get into the effects, because I thought the effects were absolutely something to write home about. They went for it, and there were some great kills, not just pickaxe kills and stuff like that, but there was a kill that happened almost by accident, where a dude gets his neck wrapped up in some cord and basically ends up decapitated by it because he's suspended high in the air. And man, that was an aggressive scene. And then there was another scene where the cops discover a body outside the mines at a laundromat. And that one was like, oh, that was so much more graphic than I thought it would be. I loved the gore in this movie. And again, I've said on this channel numerous times, I'm sort of the gore hound of the group. And this really satisfied me on so many levels. It's interesting because, again, after I watched it, and even while I was watching it, I was like, why didn't I watch this when I was younger? I would have loved this movie. It definitely would have been one I would have watched over and over and over again. I'm so bummed that I miss out on it for the last almost 40 years. Almost 40 years now.
Yeah.
Oh, it's such a bummer. If you guys haven't seen the 1981 My Bloody Valentine, it's a great old school slasher movie for sure. So the effects for you?
Yeah, I think they did a great job. And one thing that I like to compare about the two is because I feel like because there wasn't really a rating structure like we did have in 2009. I want to say 2009. 2009. And so they were able to get away with a lot more and really get it to be that bloody, gory aspect that I don't feel like we really hit in the remake. The remake was fun because it was 3D, but you didn't have as many fun kills.
Right.
Not
as many variable kills for sure.
Right, and the practical was amazing. And I even liked it at one point where they were having the party, they had this big pot of food cooking. It was like hot dogs. And then somebody realized they pulled out a heart out of the boiling water, and they were like, "Oh, who put this in there?" To find out later it belonged to somebody.
Yeah.
And that is so fun because they're partying and they're like, ew, what is this?
Yeah, that was
oh my god, that was Freddy.
That was a great filmmaker choice too, because that's the thing. The killer in My Bloody Valentine takes hearts and puts them on display and sends them in candy boxes. So at one point, the group of kids that are cooking, preparing for this party, they pull a heart out of their crock pot, and they're just like, ew, what is this? And they just kind of put it aside and don't pay any attention. And it was just oh my god, I know what that is. That's someone's heart. That's really good. That's well done storytelling, especially for back in the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah, I dug it.
This movie was well thought out, and it's set up for the kills and then just a different atmosphere, like the killing zones and things like that, everything was really thought through, and you didn't really understand until you got to the end. And I think if we didn't watch the new one and we saw this without seeing the remake, it would have got us completely by surprise with the resolution.
Absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, I don't want to talk about much else. I mean, it was shot competently. This one's not about the cinematography because it's largely claustrophobic in the mines and sets and stuff like that. But, yeah, I mean, the movie is just tremendous. So, do you have any final thoughts?
No, I think that
recommend for sure. I
definitely recommend this movie, especially if you're a huge slasher fan and you really like that blood and gore and just getting to the nitty gritty, and it has that great storytelling, which I'm a big fan of, especially to find in a 1980s slasher film. That's really rare. So definitely check it out and let us know how you felt about it.
For sure. So let us know in those comments down below. While you're down there, click that like button if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe if you want to see more like it. If you want to become a patron and request movies like this for us to review, the link is in the description box down below as well. We greatly appreciate those of you that do support the channel that way. Thank you very much. Until next time, though, I've been Cecil Laird.
I'm Marcia Parker.
And remember, stay scared.